Okay, here we go. So, I got this thing up and running. Um, how's it going? All that good stuff. So, this is going to be my instructions for the day. You guys will be here 1:20, so tomorrow, Thursday, the 20th. This will be my B day class, and this is for all y'all. And unfortunately, I won't be there today. I would much rather do this in person. This is a much funner lesson for me because it's actual history instead of geography, which is what I prefer. But move this to start this. Um, we're going to be working today on two different things. One, your quiz, okay, which one should be pretty straightforward. The other one being your this lesson that we're going to be doing here today, kind of a brief overview of European history. That's going to tie into how you say um, the European Union and the immigration crisis. We're going to go over next week and all that good stuff before you take a test. And we're talking about Bosnia and that whole massacre thing. And so here's a little tidbit. What you guys are going to do now is before you do any of this lesson is go take that quiz. It'll be on Google Classroom. It'll be a Google quiz. You go through it, you click through it, answer all the questions, and then you will submit it to your designated turn-in box. You don't turn it into your designated turn-in box, right? It's gonna be a problem because it'll make grading for me really difficult. All you're gonna do is take the Google quiz, take a screenshot, upload that to the turn-in box on Google Classroom, and I will punch in those numbers later tonight or tomorrow night. So first do that. Take 20 minutes, half an hour to go do that, and then come back here to do this lesson. So hopefully you've done that quiz now. You're done. You're moved on. You got it turned into the proper box. This lesson should last about an hour. The thing you need to know about this lesson is there's a lot of European history. We got to cover a lot of stuff, so we don't have a lot of time to screw around. The big thing that you need to remember is last time I did this, all of you guys just skipped through it as quickly as you could to try and find the answers. Okay, you guys, there's going to be more to it than that. I'm not going to let you do that this time. You need to get out a piece of paper, put on the top writing prompt, and you also need to get out the notes that will be attached into the Google Classroom next to this video. And you need to start filling that out either online, and I guess I won't be able to get you to them in person, but start filling them out on on your own copy of those notes. Okay, but the biggest thing is you're going to be doing a writing prompt, and I'm going to expect you to fill it out properly, and it will be for a grade. Here's the thing: throughout this lesson, I'm going to have you write down random things on that piece of paper to prove that you were listening throughout the entire time. If you weren't listening the entire time, like it's going to show. I'm going to hold you accountable because I'm going to go through. I'm going to look for those answers, and if you don't have them there because you skipped through this, I'm going to give you 0. So pay attention, is what I'm saying. So, anyways, you should have a piece of paper out by now. If you need to pause, and then we'll move on. Okay, but first we're going to do European history. So, writing prompts, right? What are the two greatest lessons America learned from Europe? So, I want you to do this. You can do this with a friend, try and figure out, come to a consensus of ours, like what you think that was, or just take a wild guess. How much of European history do you know? What's the influences that came from Europe to us, and how that affected us? Because there's a lot, obviously, a ton of our culture and a ton of our ways of thinking come from Europe, and so we're going to be talking about that. So the first thing you should know about European history is we started all in Greece, if you will. This is kind of the beginning point of where it all started as far as European culture and a lot of European ways of thinking. Okay. This civilization is 2,000 plus years old. It is extremely old, and it's where a bunch of different religions come from, like Zeus and Athena, not Athena, um, think of all the Roman ones. Uh, Zeus and the dude with the trident, Neptune, the other one. What's his name? Neptune and Jupiter are the same thing, right? Anyways, somebody will correct me because my brain's not working right now. So all those gods that you know about, and Hercules, that's another one, but I'm pretty sure he's Roman. Those are, that's where all this comes from, stuff like that. They're a polytheistic religion, meaning that they worship multiple gods. So see how these are underlined here? Okay, you need to fill those in into your notes. Okay, that way I know you're paying attention, so on and so forth. Okay, first thing that you need to do as far as like what, um, you know, what you need to write down in addition to your writing prompt is you need to answer the question, who's this guy, right, with the trident, okay? Google it if you have to, but you need to put an answer down because this is going to prove to me that you were paying attention. It's just a random question that I came up with. Put down the answer. That way I know. All right. Anyways, they believe they were human. They were in human form, but they had superhuman strength, like Zeus and Athena, and so on and so forth. Okay. So ancient Greece, some of their achievements, right? Art, literature, drama, philosophy, right, and math are lasting legacies. So philosophy is the big one. That is, for me, anyways. I always preach about it. If you look at the top right corner of the room, there's that ugly-looking dude called Socrates, and he has a quote that says, all I know is I know nothing, and that's pretty much the whole core tenet of philosophy. He's the father of philosophy. He's the guy who invented it, and he birthed a way of thinking that completely revolutionized everything. Right, so you need to put that down. Right, father of psychology, or not psychology, father of philosophy is Socrates. Okay, you need to put that down in your writing prompt sheet that you will be turning in today. Okay, so ancient Greece, right, formed separate communities called city-states, right? So if you guys see here, like if you look at the terrain, speaking of geography, look at this terrain, it's extremely rocky and extremely hilly. And so they had a really hard time like being spread out and finding different places to live. They all kind of lived in these cities, all right, all in one spot because it was hard to spread out, because it was so rocky. And so they were these very independent little nations, if you will, all right, and this laid the foundation of European government and culture. Athens introduced the Western idea to democracy. So, as you guys know, the way they did their government, the way democracy works is everybody gets one vote and how things are going to work, right? It's not a dictatorship, right? Like you see in other countries and ancient civilizations before Greece. Okay, so the idea of democracy has been around for thousands of years, right? America is just kind of the first one to make it really stick and work. Okay. And so, this is Sparta, right? So this is the same thing that we're talking about. We're talking about Sparta, Athens, right? If you guys haven't heard of Sparta, it's like the 300 movie. If you haven't seen 300, go watch it. It's amazing. It's a lot of fun. You'll definitely see a lot of history there. It's a really cool story about these 300 soldiers that hold off this massive horde of people. Totally go check it out. Ancient Greece. Okay. So, skipping forward like 1,000 years or so, we move straight to the Roman Empire. Okay, this is the next biggest empire. It's probably has an empire that has the most influence of any of the ancient empires ever. Okay, the Roman eventually took over Greeks, right? Rome conquered the entire Spain of Europe, Southwest Asia, and Africa. As you can see, they took over a lot. Many, many different types of people all fell under the Roman rule. And the reason this is because they were really good at inventing stuff. Okay, so we'll get to the invention stuff really. Religion first, right? Polytheistic, right? So if you guys needs to understand what polytheistic means, poly means many, right, or a lot, right? Theistic is another way of describing religion, if you will. So it means polytheistic, meaning many gods. And so they basically took the Greek religion of Zeus and all that and just copied it almost verbatim and just gave it a different name. It's like some of y'all cheating on your homework. Um, you guys do it a lot. I know you do. You just take pictures and then send it to each other. It's disgusting. Okay. And then what do? You say, hey man, change it a little, right? So we don't get caught. That's basically what the Romans did to an entire religion. So, and then as you guys know, the whole story of Christianity and like the Roman guards crucifying Jesus and that whole thing, and this births Christianity. Okay, this was a video here, but we don't have access to it. Right. So back to the Roman inventions, right? So some of the achievements developed a government law, engineering influenced over culture, roads, bridges, aqueducts, right? The Julian calendar, right? So like the whole May, June, July thing. Yeah, that came from the Roman Empire. That calendar is 2,000 plus years old. That's why it's called 2022, because it started in the Roman Empire 2,000 years ago, shortly after Jesus died. So, and they invented concrete. Guess what's a major plus for building buildings? Aqueducts, great way to get water, right? Roads and bridges. The reason the Roman Empire was so incredibly good is because they had incredible engineers. Technology is like the cornerstone of any civilization. If you got good tech, you're going to be ahead of everybody else, obviously. So, being educated, extremely good for the country. For those of you who are on your phone and tuning me out. So, and then we had the Coliseums. You guys should know the story of the Coliseums. If you don't know the story of the Coliseums, right? It's basically gladiators going in, fighting each other. Want to watch a cool movie about it? Go watch the movie Gladiator. It's incredible. It's got Russell Crowe in it. It's an incredible movie. It definitely kind of somewhat accurately depicts Roman culture and the Roman society and what it was like to be a gladiator and the fact that it doesn't matter who you are, you can become one. This slavery was not a uncommon thing in the Roman Empire. It just happened regularly, and if you were a slave, sometimes you were forced to fight in the Coliseum. So, anyways, the Christian Empire takes over. Christianity spreads like wildfire. It turns everybody into Christians. Okay, they denounce Zeus and all them, and they go into the back burner. And so Christian becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire, and they form a thing called Catholicism, right? And eventually spread throughout all the Western world. So this is another word for Catholics, right? So think Pope, funny hat, right? He's the guy in charge now. The Roman Empire is too big. It is cannot be controlled very well. There's a whole long story about Julius Caesar becoming the first dictator of Rome, and that eventually leads to the downfall of all of Rome because dictators are bad and they never work. Um, so totally keep that in mind. That's a very important history lesson. You will learn that in hopefully my world history class next year. So two parts of the empire was with two different leaders, right? The Byzantine was the east, the Roman was the west, and so we have a split empire. Causes all sorts of different things. You see a split down the middle there. The Middle Ages, okay. Another thing to write down. Yeah, we'll do it later. Period between ancient and modern times. This is kind of like, another name for it is the Dark Ages. Okay, and the reason that is because like inventions, technology, reading, education, it all just goes black. And it causes a lot of problems because what ends up happening is like who's in charge? Who's in charge of all of this? It's the Roman Church. Okay, and they control all the writing and knowledge. Now, what ends up happening is like it's like time and progress just comes to a screeching halt because of this. Because knowledge is controlled by one organization. And back then, that organization was incredibly corrupt. And so they call it the Dark Ages because of that, because, you know, uh, they didn't believe in anything other than the Word of God. And so, and of course, they were very corrupt about it, and so this time kind of came to a standstill here, right? So again, it's a time between ancient and modern times, kind of this transition period. All right, feudalism is taking over. It's a system which lords give land to nobles in return for loyalty. Replace civil government. Okay, so this is like basically slavery, uh, in a sense. You all you did was work. You died when you were like my age and most people could not read or write, and so it's just like this gaggle of idiots who are just trying to survive while this very few people who were in charge controlled everything. And it's unbelievable, right? And just think about it, like when you hit 24, 25, maybe 26, like your body from then on is on the decline. Okay, you just start to decay very, very slowly. Well, if your body is pushed and malnourished to the absolute extreme, you die at like my age. Like I would be considered a very old man back then. So that's just how rough this system was. So, anyways, all right, art in the Middle Ages is very distinct. It becomes, uh, how do you say, just unique is the best way I could put it. I'm not much of an art guy, right? And this is kind of a bare breakdown of how feudalism works, right? And so, yeah, peasants, knights, barons, and kings, right? All of them having loyalty to one person to another. It's just a hierarchy structure, and so on and so forth. And just a different way of breaking things down. You'll learn about more about that next time. Okay, so the Black Plague. All right, this is a disease that spreads across Europe, 1350 to 1450. Guess who brought it over? The Mongolians. Okay, almost a 100% mortality rate. That's not quite true. I don't know why that's in there. If it had a 100% mortality rate, that'd be a lot. Okay. It was caused by fleas. A lot of people say it was caused by rats. That is also true. It was the fleas on the rats that caused this problem. Um, there you go. It's previously tested the rats. Bacteria in the rat blood carried over in the fleas and infected humans because fleas will bite you. If you wake up at night and or in the morning and you have little red marks and it itches a little bit, it's because you have fleas in your bed. You need to wash your sheets. Okay, 25 million people died. This is almost, it's not all of Europe. It was a quarter of Europe. Um, it was bad. It was very bad. A lot of people died. When we talk about COVID-19, right? Like the amount of people who have died in COVID-19 is in the world is less than a percentage. Okay, less than 1%. Uh, I'm fairly positive on that. I didn't look it up, so if you look it up, I'll be wrong. In fact, put that down um, on your writing prompt that you'll be turning in later. Is do some research. What's the exact percentage of people who have died from COVID-19? That's a very political answer, and so a lot of you will get different results, and that's okay. So yeah, it should be less than a percentile. And so if you think about that, we have less than a percentile. And our modern world is freaking out about less than a percentile. Imagine what 25% is. Okay, 25%. It's like 1 in 4 people die. If you look around this room right now, you take a solid chunk of it and just happen to be like, ah, you're dead now. Okay, because that's how bad it was. Everybody died. It was really, really bad. So this had a huge impact on their art, where everybody is gonna die, and it feels like the end of the world. Guess what? You're on your mind. You start thinking about death, and these are some of the famous paintings that came out of the Black Plague era. Okay, and so this is talking about like some ancient medical treatments, leeching. Right, so you intentionally attach a leech to you to suck your blood out of an attempt of thinking that helps. Right, that has to do with bile, right, an imbalance of bile in your blood. It's a long story of like what they thought around that. Again, you'll learn that in U.S. history, not U.S. history, world history. And yeah, it was different. A lot of bloodletting and leeching and stuff that just only made it worse. So, unfortunately, that didn't help at all. So this is what it looks like. Right, all the good stuff. Big old pustule nastiness. Anyways, so the Renaissance, yay! Okay, so we're starting to see some change, right? A 300 period of discovery and learning, right? From 1300s to 1600s, we are out of the Dark Ages. We are into progress again. Advances in Europe, civilization, interest in ancient culture, Roman Greece, right? Guess what they start getting back into? They start getting back into engineering, philosophy. They start looking back at the past, right? And relearning all of these lessons. stressed the importance of people and their place in the world, right? Led to scientific advances, literature, and sculpture, right? So what's that? You should know. It starts with the C. It's a cathedral, right? And then we talk about this old king who really wanted a divorce some other time. Okay, so the Sistine Chapel, I intentionally threw this in here because it's a hilarious story. It was painted by Michelangelo. So this church has this painting on the ceiling. As you can see, it is massive. It's an incredible painting done by Michelangelo, and it's hilarious because it's like a giant, like the world's greatest troll, if you will. Notice all the naked dudes running around? Yeah, the Pope wasn't happy about that when he got to his church and noticed a bunch of naked dudes painted on his ceiling. Yeah, he wasn't too happy about it. The big thing is Michelangelo had a lot of issues with the Pope. Didn't like the way they was treating people and the way they were conducting themselves. So um, it's pretty wild. Michelangelo was a genius of a painter, as you guys see, like incredible levels of painting. And if you guys didn't know this, right, this is God, this is Adam, and they're touching and the connecting between the two, the Adam and Eve, so on and so forth. What's really cool is this cloth thingy, okay, is anatomically correct to a brain. And so I doubt Michelangelo knew what a brain was or what it looked like, but just from like what seemed like instinct, he drew a perfectly correct brain. So just pretty cool, right? So we got lots of cool things coming out of the Renaissance. Another video you can't see. Oh, there it goes. So the Reformation, 1517 to 1648, right? This is a religious movement that lessens the power of the Catholic Church, right? So as you guys know, there's a lot of problems in the Catholic Church. It's been going on for a long time, right? This leads to a beginning of the Protestantism, right? You ever heard of Protestant? They came out of this movement. This leads to religious wars. And when I mean wars, like lots of Catholics killing lots of Protestants. Okay, it was not a pretty time. This war where European monarchs had power over nobles in the church. Okay, so lots of power in the church, and the church starts to play a second uh, leading role, and the king starts to get way more power. Okay, so lesson learned in America that separated the church and state, built right into the Constitution. Right? Some of you guys probably don't know this. In the First Amendment, where it says freedom of speech, it also says there's a separation of church and state. Okay, this is the first, or not the first, but not one of the biggest answers, right, to what America learned from Europe. And that is don't let the church have control. Okay, it is illegal for that to happen in this country. All right, here's an example. If I, as a state representative, somebody who works for the government, I cannot take you, my children, my students, and lead you in a prayer of any religion at all. Okay, Christianity, Islam, whatever it is, I cannot lead a prayer, right? I cannot pray with you in church, or not in church, excuse me, in school. In church, I obviously can. Okay, that is illegal. Uh, um, it is forbidden. You cannot do that. It is very unconstitutional. Okay, I cannot teach like I cannot go in front of you and say Christianity is 100% correct 100% of the time. I cannot say that. I just have to say it's a religion and this is what they believe. Okay, and same thing with all the other religions. And I cannot steer you in one way or the other. Okay, and that all comes from this movement. We as Americans, our founding fathers looked at that and went like, let's not make that mistake. Okay, we don't want all the power in one spot. So you need to write this down in the writing prompt. This will be my check. If you do not have this written down on that writing prompt, I will not give you credit for today's work. So it doesn't have to be this verbatim, right? But something along those lines. Okay, this guy, you need to know him. It's not Martin Luther King, it's Martin Luther, the guy who Martin Luther King was named after, right? He led this Reformation. It went up to a wall or a door in a church, tacked on some 99 Theses, all that good stuff, and said, hey, there's a bunch of problems, right? So he causes all this giant, like, upheaval of respect for the church, and people are starting to be like, nope, I had enough of this. he tacks on those 99 theses, and people start to revolt like crazy, and it causes a bunch of problems. So, yeah, he's a very interesting character and the historical implications of what that meant for him. The other big thing that you need to put in for the Reformation here is the printing press. The ability for everybody to have access to material of knowledge and having access to education, because that was forbidden before, made massive changes, like massive changes. Because what is year after year the number one book sold around the world every single time? That is the Bible. Okay, even in modern days, and it was especially true back then, because what ended up happening is that if you couldn't read or write, right, guess where you got all your knowledge about the world? From the church. Okay, and they were doing all sorts of crazy things like selling penances and stuff like that, where you could pay a bunch of money for a piece of paper, and they would say, "Hey, we now forgive all your sins because you paid us money," which is a racket. It's not how it works. So when you have a printing press and you have everybody now has a Bible in their hands that's easily produced, guess what happens? People start to read the Bible and learn to read and so on and so forth, and start interpreting the Bible in their own ways differently than the church. So this causes huge upheaval. I sneeze. Okay, Christopher Columbus, all that good stuff. There he is. Look at him go. Sorry, I have to sneeze. You know his story, right? You've been learning about him since elementary school. Comes over, discovers New World, discovers it really wasn't him. He totally thought he was India. It was this other guy named Mariac. I forget his name. It's like Spanish or Italian or something like that. So, but it's where that guy is where we got the name America from. I can't remember exactly. Anyways, back to something more interesting. Okay, 1650 to 1800s. Guess what's happening? America is now a thing. Right, we discovered it. It's conquistadors. Right, doing a lot of raping and pillaging. Okay, colonies are sprouting up everywhere. Right, this leads to a massive amount of change, though, because, like, remember I was talking about that printing press. Everybody starts to get a little more educated. Guess what? We've been talking about a 800-year period in history where the most important thing that changed is the people were educated, and it changed everything. So guess how important your education is? Somewhere in extremely important. You need to know this stuff. That way you're not, putting tinfoil on your head and believing the world is flat. Okay, it's extremely important, your ability to like process information and value it. Like history just screaming at you to know this stuff, like begging you not to make these same mistakes and not thinking history isn't important. You need to know this stuff. Okay. Anyways, so this is in a movement where people become enlightened, right? They start to discover the scientific method and start valuing knowledge and now not valuing knowledge. Right? It's a movement where educated Europeans emphasize the importance of free thinking, right, and beginning to question traditions and values. So this is the second most important thing that America learns from Europe is free thinking, the idea of having freedom. Okay, it all comes from this valuing of education, and having thoughts of your own and going out and testing those thoughts and making sure that they are true. Okay, this is extremely important, right? That's what this entire country is built upon. It's like, hey man, you do you. You get to do what you want. It's really cool. So, um, it's so lame. I can only talk about this for an hour. We'll never talk about it again. Oh, by the way, everything I've mentioned so far, great question material, right? When it comes to points, I've just given you like thousands of questions. So yeah, so free thinking, right? So what this leads to is they start to question traditions and values. Okay, and so this starts to get everybody starting to think for themselves. Basically, this causes a bunch of revolutions, right? Guess what that leads to? people are looking at this going, we need to like maybe not be under a king, um, because that's what whole 1776 was about. America, a bunch of free thinkers were like, maybe the king isn't the greatest idea ever, and we're going to use a system 3,000 years old, invented by the Greeks at the beginning of this PowerPoint I mentioned. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. That they learned from history and they completely changed the world. Okay, all in like 10 years, right? That's what, almost half of your lifespan. Look how much of history has changed, all because of past history lessons in this one 10-year span in 1776 that made a big difference. So yeah, history is important. Free thinking causes revolutions. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, all sorts of revolutions, right? The Russian Revolution in a weird kind of way. So, yeah. So more of these dudes. Okay, revolutions, right? People wanted to say in their governments, right? So they challenged the monarchies, England, France, and others. Okay, those two big ones that I just mentioned. Okay, England, right, and like the English Bill of Rights, right? Guess where we get our Bill of Rights? So much good stuff to talk about. Okay, so the French Revolution, off with their heads, is their like official motto. They saw our revolution, 1776, which became before this. We're talking about European history specifically, so we need to continue to talk about this. How much time has gone by? I don't know. Um, okay, 30 minutes. Okay, so French Revolution. That is, what am I trying to say? Yeah, off of their heads. Okay, so they started murdering everybody, particularly the king and queen. Okay, here's another thing I want you to write down in this particular point in your writing prompt. You need to write randomly somewhere on your paper. Let them eat cake. If you can tell me what that means, I'm gonna be impressed. I will give you, I don't know, gum. I have gum in my desk. Don't steal my gum, you bunch of thieves. Everybody's stealing my gum. You all need to stop. Okay, who's this? Napoleon, right? He's a long story on the French Revolution. Let's dive into it real quick. The French Revolution, basically, a bunch of people were like, screw kings and queens, and they started killing everybody. And if you weren't like along with that, they chopped your head off too. They were like, oh, you're not down with the revolution? Killing you as well. They killed thousands, thousands and thousands of people. Right? This is where the guillotine comes from, and they invented that, and they used it all the time, like every day. And fun fact, the last one was in like 1777 or 1977, like 40 years ago. Was the guillotine was used to cut off somebody's head. Pretty intense. So yeah. Anyways, yeah. Then Napoleon comes along and like all this provisional government, the French haven't figured it out, and people are getting sick of it. And Napoleon was like, "I'm a super awesome, popular general. You also just make me like dictator," and they did for a little bit, and then they exiled him shortly after that. You know, it's a long story. And then he came back, and then he left again. So the Industrial Revolution changes everything. So we have all this free thinking. Guess what that leads to? Lots of education, which leads to inventions, which leads to better technology, and leads to better lives, which leads to Industrial Revolution. Education is super important. So we have educated people making cool new things. Guess what they make, right? The automatic reaper. What's it called? Basically the mechanical reaper is what it's called. Sweet. That is a machine that harvests wheat and food for you. And so instead of requiring, 50 people to harvest wheat from one field, you just have like 10 dudes and a couple horses, and they do it all in like a day. And so the ability to produce food just goes through the roof. When you have an increase in food, what do you have, right? Increase in life, because more people are eating more, they're more well nourished, they're They're healthier, they're living longer, babies are living longer, the population, poof, explodes. Okay, so this begins in England and rapidly spreads to other countries, right? So England, if you think back then, like 1800s, factory and making horrible conditions and child labor, that type of thing, right? Machinery, industrial cities, transportations were all new, right? Industrial capitalism emerged here, where businesses leaders use profit to expand companies, right? Emerging middle class, right? We're starting to enter into modern civilization. Okay, uh, this is like a before and after, like the expansion of cities and so on and so forth. Child labor, it wasn't fun. So, legacy of World War One, right? So we have a like I can't even I just can't even begin to describe to you World War One. It's why we study history. I mean, in your doohickey writing prompts, World War One. That's why we study history. Is to not do this. World War One is insane. Um, I can't even begin to start how just absolutely ludicrous bonkers World War One was. Um, yeah, there's a video on it. What's it called? It's hilarious. What's that YouTube channel that makes it? Um, Not Knowledge Hub. History Shorts or something like that. Anyways, it's like this animated explanation of World War One. It's hilarious. Go watch it. It's like a half an hour. You'll enjoy it. Again, it's really funny. So, but the thing that you need to know about this is it was an absolutely horrific war where millions and millions and millions of people died for the absolutely stupidest of reasons. I mean, oh my gosh, go watch a movie called Gallipoli, and it kind of sums up the feeling about what World War One was like perfectly. Just a complete and utter waste of human life. It's hard to even begin to describe how frustrating it is that human beings are that dumb. Um, y'all need to pay attention to your emotions because that's all this war was about is a bunch of fragile young men who don't know how to handle their emotions. It is pathetic. And I see that disease running rampant through America right now. So you guys need to pay attention to those. Spit all over my laptop. So war begins more skilled, which created more carnage, right? Uh, Skilled is a different word for that. It's called technology. Okay, it's a little different riding a horse into battle when you have artillery that can shoot a 2-ton shell 20 miles, right, and explode and dig up a small house. Like technology just becomes more deadly. It ultimately leads to World War II because Hitler was a sore loser, and America, instead of helping Germany and helping them like become a better country that learns from their mistakes, they just kept punishing them. And eventually, if you trap an animal in a corner, it doesn't have anywhere to run. It will start fighting instead. Big history lesson there. Definitely a point-worthy question on that one. Um, this ultimately leads to World War II because the German people felt trapped and they're like, we don't know what to do. We're just going to put all our faith in this one crazy lunatic with a funny mustache and hope that works. And that's what they did. And it led to World War II. A more powerful centralized government, racism, hatred towards nations and ethnicities, all that stuff. Okay, war between Europe powers. France, Russia, Russian Empire, British Empire, Italy, and the United States were all allied against Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottomans, right, and Bulgaria. It was a horrifically long war. A lot of people will say the United States came in, and that's the final, with our military might. That's the reason that the Allies won. That's not the truth. Okay, France, right? A lot of people will say France is not a famous military, fighting force. They surrender super quickly. That is 100% not true. They bore the brunt of World War One. If it wasn't for French courage, French resilience, right, the history would be completely different. Um, Germans were all but defeated by the time the Americans came. Like, it would be me fighting a toddler. It was just a no match, uh, or Raven, or somebody along those lines. Okay, yeah, it's just not a contest. So Yeah, know that for reality. Uh, the result, the monarchies collapsed. Several new countries in Central and Eastern Europe, right? The Versailles Peace Treaty, right, said Germany was guilty and had to make reparations, right? So that's what I was talking about. Germany has to pay reparations, and that made the country feel cornered, and that's why they turned to extremes. Um, Here's a picture of World War One. There's a documentary called "They Shall Not Be Forgotten." Absolutely incredible documentary. I mean, it's like you're there. It's as good as it's gonna get. They take actual World War One veterans and record their voices of them telling the story, and that's what narrates it. It's amazing. Totally go watch it. Uh, or 1917 is a movie that came out recently. Absolutely amazing movie. It's like one of the best World War One movies out there. It's incredible. Totally recommend it. So, causes of World War Two: aggression, expansion, racism, fascism, Treaty of Versailles, all that good stuff. We went over it. Axis versus Allied: Germany, Italy, Japan, Poland, UK, France. Okay, eventually grew to include the Soviet Union and the United States, right? Which was unbelievable on the Axis's part that they attacked the Soviet Unions and then, of course, Japan attacked America, which, like, what were you thinking? So this is basically an extension of World War One, rise of Germany, blah blah blah. Most of the world, right? This leads to the Holocaust. You gotta know that, right? So why we won? I'm gonna take a little detour here. I want to talk about why we won because I find this fascinating. The three B's of any good soldier: beans, bullets, and boots. Okay, you gotta have them. Gotta have food. Gotta have bullets. Gotta have something to walk on. Without those three things, you're screwed. Okay, and here's how you win any war pretty much ever. As long as you got those three covered, better than the other guys, you win. Okay, that's basically how it works. Unless you're fighting like a guerrilla force, then it's different. So, logistics wins wars. That's how it works. Now, I'm going to talk about something that I find absolutely fascinating. We were the best. We were by far the best. We made stuff better than anybody. This is a Liberty ship. It is quite large. It is very big. It is very good for hauling all those beans, bullets, boots. Okay, you need to have this. You gotta have ships that move this stuff around. This is a gigantic ship. It's like, I don't know, 90 feet long or something like that. Big, or 90 yards, or whatever. It's big. It's a big boat. And so it's bigger than this building. Let's put it to you that way. Okay, and we could build one of these. The record that we set for building one of these from beginning to finish, 4 days. There it is. 4 days. 4 days we built one of these. Okay, it's like building the school in 4 days. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. Like we were really good at building these things. You ever seen those old World War II Jeeps? Yeah, we would make one of those every 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes, we were cranking out one of those things. Yeah, it's pretty insane, like what we could do. Um, American tanks. American tanks were not that good. Um, they didn't have a lot of armor. They didn't have a lot of very big firepower, right? And versus like the Germans had incredible tanks. They were really really good. The only difference was is that we had a good bazillion of tanks, and the Germans only had like a small percentage, right, of these really good tanks, and we just overran them. So yeah, World War II. That's a little side note for you. Liberty ships. Write that down on your doohickey, right? If it's not written down, you will not get credit. All that good stuff. So tactics of war, right? Germany Blitzkrieg, Japanese kamikazes, U-boats. I don't even know why this is a dumb slide. So, anyways, let's talk about some of the atrocities. The Holocaust. The Holocaust were real. There's people out there that deny it. Don't be one of these people. Be educated. Like, and you know what to say to that. Stop believing in all this crap. There's mounds of evidence that prove this. So the concentration camps, the Holocaust killed approximately 6 million people. You should know that number just off the top of your head. At any given point in time, somebody goes up to you and asks you how many people died in the Holocaust. You go 6 million. You should just know that number. Um, it's amazing how people don't have respect for that. Like, people that go to Auschwitz, which is a famous concentration camp in Poland, and like American tourists will go there and they'll like graffiti on the wall or something like that. And it's just like, yeah, it's unbelievable. Some people's kids. Don't be that person. Don't be that guy who fails out of high school, goes to Auschwitz off your daddy's money, and defaces it like that, and just has no respect for history or for the dead. Uh, like care about something, care, have values, like be somebody, right, who stands up for something. And being educated about this type of thing is exactly how you do that, right? You think history is boring. It's not. It's you who's boring, right? I know that may be hard for you to hear, and it's not fun because it may be felt as a direct attack on you, but it's the truth. No escaping it. Okay? I'm telling you the truth so that you can change that about you and move on from it. Okay? Um, so this is some of the effects, right? This creates the United Nations, okay, and Israel. We'll talk about Israel some other time. The United Nations, 51 countries committed to maintain international peace and security, developing friendly relations amongst nations, promoting social progress, better living standards, and human rights, so on and so forth. So it's called the UN. There's lots of jokes about the UN. It's hilarious. You should totally look it up if you know anything about international politics. Yeah, we'll talk about that when you're older. We're a part of the UN. You should know that. Okay, before World War One, after World War One, after World War Two, lots of things changed. Lots of countries disappeared and were gobbled up by the Soviet Union. We'll talk about that later. World War Two. In your writing prompts, do some research. What island was that picture taken? The guy with the flag. I realize you have no idea what I'm poking at. Um, this right here. What's this? What island is this? Starts with an I. Holocaust, right? Mass grave. Those are all real bodies. They didn't have Photoshop back then. Okay, so this leads to the Cold War. So the Soviet Union is a thing, right? They have all this power because they fought in World War II, and America has all this power because they fought in World War II, and they're the winners. And so they're trying to figure out who has the most control. Russia is communist, we're a democracy, right? And they're butting heads to try and figure out who's better. Democracy won, obviously. Okay, the War of the Worlds, the power between these two types of governments. It's like my favorite piece of history. It's where we all almost died. It's absolutely incredible. These spy games were incredible. Totally check those out. There's a movie with Tom Hanks that came out recently. I am the worst with names. It's Tom Hanks' spy. Tom Hanks spy movie. Type it in and you'll find it. It's really good. You how do you say it? It's, gay guy. He's a computer inventor in World War II. I can't think of his name right now. Or the name of the movie. Type in what I just said, and you'll find that movie too. Absolutely amazing movie. Talking about that period in time where they invented the computer to crack German codes. So Western Europe grew, right, while Eastern Europe lagged behind during this time. Okay, so that's why Eastern Europe, I put that meme in there, is because Eastern Europe is struggling. I looked at that website and I looked at the top murders per 100,000 people. So it's just like who experiences the most amount of murder per person. The top 10 were all Eastern Europe countries, with two exceptions being America and Thailand, which is surprising. Thailand. Yeah, so Eastern Europe is struggling. It's funny. So yeah, anyways, this is the Cold War, and as you see, it basically split in half: democracy, communist. So this leads to a new era. Eastern countries pushed for independence. Right, Berlin Wall fell. You should totally know what the Berlin Wall is because that's like the symbol of the end for the communist regime in Germany and, of course, in USSR. And the USSR is no longer a thing. The democracy emerged in Eastern Europe. Okay, another thing for the writing prompt that you have to write down for credit for this class is the Russian national anthem. Look it up. It's amazing. Write down the Russian national anthem. It's way better than ours. Let's just put it that way. Okay, it just sounds way cooler. I'm kidding. Ours is better. All right, and that's it. Okay, so this leads to, guess what? Europe, Cold War, all this here. Guess what all this leads to? All right, the European Union. This is the European Union with a lot of these different countries in here. This is kind of like Cold War still. And so it eventually involves a lot of these Eastern European countries, former Yugoslavia, and all the murder that happened in that in that country. My God, we'll talk about it. It's scary. And all these countries start to become a part of the United Nations. That was that big lesson that we talked about the last time you were in my class, slash you talked about, and I was homesick. So yeah, that's all the different how do you say um, of like it's like an explanation of how the United Nations came together. There's this big effort to keep World War II from ever happening again. And so we're like, let's all be friends, and we're gonna do it by force. Kind of, not really by force, but like it's a long story. It's just really enticing and really good for a country to join the European Union. Um, so that's why we go over this history, right? To see all the influences and see how it affects Europe today in the European Union. And we can talk about it like Brexit, where the British leave the European Union and the consequences that have come from that. And so the where the United Nations or not United Nations, the European Union stands and what they believe in versus their neighbors, Russia, which is still a heavily influenced communist country. Um, so and where they stand, right? So this is important that you know the European Union and all that good stuff. Okay, last thing you need to put down, you need to put down this country right here, Czechoslovakia, just because look how big that word is. Yeah. You can also put down Budapest, just because Budapest is a funny word. I like saying Budapest. It starts with a B. B, 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 B. All right, that's it. Go ahead and turn in your writing prompt. Make sure you're turning in your quiz to the proper section. This is your European history. I hope you guys have a ton of questions when I come back about all this cool stuff that I was talking about and all that good stuff. We're right at 53 minutes. All right, so that's a long time, but uh, not that long. So yeah, it should cover the entire class, and that's what I wanted. Okay, bye bye. Stop this thing.